The Aztecs have this wonderful migration story where they say that they came from a place well to the north called Aslan, and that they had this migration that went through kind of a hero's journey.
Scientists sequenced the DNA of every major civilization that existed before the Aztecs, and every single male bloodline was gone. Not reduced, not blended, erased.
It's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America. Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya. But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs.
The women survived, the mothers lived, but every father across the Olmec, the Maya, the Toltec, the builders of Teotihuacan, deleted from the genetic record as if they never existed. By the end of this video, you'll understand who replaced them and why researchers are now asking a question that nobody is prepared to answer.
This is part of a curious mystery that is not unconnected to the genetic mystery. It's been known by archaeologists for quite a long time that there are anomalous skulls in parts of Brazil.
The impossible signal. In 2015, Dr. Pontus Skoglund at Harvard was running standard genetic analysis on ancient Amazonian remains. Methodical work, the kind that fills academic journals and wins quiet awards. When his algorithm returned results, he stopped moving. The DNA contained genetic markers from Aboriginal Australians from the opposite side of the planet. He didn't rerun the analysis immediately. He picked up the phone and called 2 colleagues into the lab. He needed witnesses. Because what was on that screen was impossible, according to every model conventional archaeology had ever produced. Every textbook said humans entered the Americas roughly 15,000 years ago through a single land bridge from Siberia. One migration, one source population, clean, simple, case closed. But this Australasian signal predated the Siberian migration entirely. It came from across the Pacific. It shouldn't exist. It couldn't exist. And yet there it was, confirmed 3 times with 3 different people watching.
Scientists have made a groundbreaking discovery deep in a cave in South Africa, the bones of what looked to be a new human-like species. They're thought to be more than 3 million years old, and officials say the find could change the way we think about our ancient relatives.
But here is the catch. The signal doesn't appear uniformly across the Americas. It's concentrated in the Amazon basin, while nearly absent everywhere else. If this were simply an ancient migration, you'd expect traces spread evenly across the continents. Instead, it's clustered, isolated, hidden in some of the most remote populations on Earth. That pattern tells a deeply disturbing story. Populations that were once widespread were systematically replaced, absorbed, eliminated over thousands of years. Wave after wave of newcomers arrived, mixed with existing populations, and erased those who came before. The only survivors were groups deep enough in the Amazon that the waves of replacement never reached them. For decades, Graham Hancock argued this exact pattern, that catastrophic population replacements occurred repeatedly across the Americas. Scientists dismissed him as a pseudoscientist. They mocked his theories publicly. But now, the DNA was backing him up. And nowhere was this pattern more devastating than in Mesoamerica. But what researchers found there makes the Amazonian signal look like a footnote.
That the settlement story of the Americas is much more complicated than we've realized. And what the DNA is doing is it's telling us that there was something really weird happened with settlement.
The erased fathers. When Dr. Maria Avila Arcos at Mexico's National Autonomous University analyzed Y chromosome data from ancient Mesoamerican remains, she wasn't expecting what came next. Nobody was. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Her coffee sat untouched, going cold. When the results populated on screen, she pushed back from her desk and stood. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she ran the analysis again. Then again. Then a third time. Each run hoping the data would change, that she'd find the contamination, the error, the explanation. The results didn't change. The male lineages of the Olmec, the builders of Teotihuacan, the early Maya, the Toltec, all of them, had vanished from the genetic record. Not diminished through natural drift. Gone. Like bloodlines cut with a surgical knife. Like someone had gone through the genetic record with a black marker and deleted entire family trees stretching back centuries. But here is the catch. The female lineages persisted across every collapse, every catastrophe, every civilization-ending event. Maternal DNA survived unbroken. Among the ancient remains, Dr. Avila Arcos analyzed was a woman researchers designated specimen 11B, buried near Teotihuacan. Her mitochondrial DNA showed direct continuity, stretching across 3 separate civilizational collapses, spanning over 800 years. 3 times the world she knew was destroyed. 3 times every man in her lineage was replaced by strangers. And her bloodline endured through all of it, mother to daughter to granddaughter, an unbroken chain of survival, while empires burned around her, the men, the fathers, the warriors, the priests, the kings, deleted from existence. And this wasn't gradual blending over centuries. The breaks in the data were sharp, sudden, coinciding exactly with moments of civilizational collapse. One generation, a thriving paternal lineage with deep roots. The next generation, completely different men, strangers, as if the original fathers had never existed. Maya sites revealed the same sharp Y chromosome breaks. Toltec genetic signatures vanished abruptly. Mixtec paternal lineages disappeared without a trace. Each civilization, separated by centuries, experienced the exact same fate. But one site stands above all the others. And what happened there still shocks archaeologists. The Teotihuacan Massacre. At its peak around 450 AD, Teotihuacan housed over 125,000 people, rivaling Rome in both population and grandeur. The Pyramid of the Sun rose over 200 feet above the valley floor, visible for miles. Its influence extended across all of Mesoamerica. Trade goods bearing its symbols have been found hundreds of miles away. Rulers in foreign lands claimed its authority to legitimize their own power. This wasn't just a city. It was the center of the known world. The Aztecs, arriving centuries later, were so overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the ruins that they believed only gods could have built them. They named it the place where men became gods. Around 550 AD, Teotihuacan didn't decline. It was destroyed with a level of violence that still shocks researchers. Temples burned so hot the stone cracked. Blood soaked into plaza stones so deeply that chemical traces remain 15 centuries later. Monuments weren't just toppled, they were deliberately defaced, with a fury suggesting not conquest, but hatred. Personal hatred. Sacred spaces desecrated, entire districts reduced to ash, and within a single generation, different men were walking through those same streets. Different Y chromosomes, different fathers, different bloodlines entirely. Dr. Andres Moreno Estrada, at Mexico's National Laboratory of Genomics, was presenting these findings at a conference when he paused mid-sentence. 200 researchers staring at a pattern none of them could explain away. He described the data as watching a crime committed in genetic slow motion. Except when you zoomed in, it wasn't slow at all. One generation to the next, complete erasure. An entire city's worth of fathers, brothers, and sons vanished, replaced by strangers who moved into their homes, worshipped in their temples, took their wives. The women remained. Their mitochondrial DNA shows unbroken continuity across the collapse. They survived. They endured. But their husbands, their fathers, their sons were replaced systematically, completely, and permanently. If this is changing the way you see ancient history, smash that like button and subscribe, because what comes next is even more disturbing. The Aztec genetic conquest. According to their own histories, the Mexica people wandered for generations before finding home. They claimed origin from a mythical northern place called Aztlan, the place of whiteness. Their god commanded them to search for a specific sign, an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a snake. For nearly 200 years they wandered, fighting, serving as mercenaries, getting expelled from one territory after another. Barbarians, outsiders, nobody wanted them. They found their sign on a swampy island in Lake Texcoco in 1325 and founded Tenochtitlan. But here is the catch. When the Aztecs arrived, they weren't walking into a competitive landscape of powerful civilizations. They were walking into a genetic graveyard. Male lineages shattered beyond recognition. Surviving populations fragmented, their paternal ancestry broken and replaced multiple times over. The land was full of survivors whose father lines had been cut, whose power structures had been dismantled by centuries of violence. Into this fractured landscape came the Aztecs with something nobody else had anymore: intact Y chromosomes. Their male lines hadn't been shattered by conquest. They arrived as a coherent genetic unit, fresh blood entering a land of broken bloodlines. And they moved fast, terrifyingly fast. Within 2 centuries, they built one of Earth's largest cities. Tenochtitlan was bigger than London or Paris. Causeways stretched across water. Aqueducts carried fresh water for miles. Floating gardens fed hundreds of thousands. When Spanish conquistadors first saw it rising from the lake in 1519, soldiers asked whether the things they saw were not a dream. As they expanded, Aztec male lineages spread across central Mexico like genetic wildfire. They married women from conquered populations, merging their Y chromosomes with maternal lineages that had survived earlier collapses. Within just a few generations, Aztec paternal ancestry became dominant across the entire empire. This wasn't political conquest. This was biological replacement on a continental scale. Dr. Alexander Ioannidis at Stanford reviewed data from city-states under Aztec control and called his research team into the room. The Y chromosome shifts were dramatic. Sometimes a complete genetic overhaul within a single generation. He said the pattern was unmistakable and unlike anything he'd seen at this scale in any population on Earth. And their language made it even more efficient. Nahuatl spread far beyond any army's reach. Traders spoke it. Marketplaces from northern Mexico to Central America echoed with it. Wherever Nahuatl went, Aztec genes followed. Merchants, soldiers, administrators, priests, each carrying their genetic heritage along with their vocabulary. The Aztecs weren't just conquering territory. They were building an empire of blood, extending their paternal ancestry across a continent whose original fathers had already been erased. The cycle that has no beginning. But here is the catch. The story doesn't start with the Aztecs. It doesn't even start with the Olmec. That Australasian signal from 2015 is ancient, far older than any known Mesoamerican civilization, possibly 15,000 years old or more. That means the pattern of genetic replacement wasn't something that emerged with organized warfare or complex civilizations. It was happening from the very beginning, before cities, before empires, before writing or agriculture. For at least 15,000 years, populations in the Americas were being rewritten. Wave after wave of men erased. Wave after wave of new bloodlines, writing themselves over the old. Dr. David Reich at Harvard reviewed the complete data set. Every ancient genome, every Y chromosome break, every maternal continuity line. In the middle of a lab meeting, he went quiet. His colleagues waited. He finally said they were only beginning to understand the true violence embedded in human genetic history. Violence leaving its signature in every sample. Violence written into the blood of survivors. Violence that mainstream archaeology refused to see until the DNA made it impossible to ignore. The Aztecs were just the latest iteration of a cycle so old it predates human memory itself. The Spanish arrival in 1519 interrupted them before they could finish. European diseases decimated their population. European weapons destroyed their military. European colonization dismantled their empire. But they couldn't erase the DNA. Aztec Y chromosomes are still there today, still dominant, still marking the genetic landscape of Mexico and Central America 500 years later. And this leaves one question nobody has answered. If this cycle has been repeating for 15,000 years, and the Aztecs were just the last wave, then who were the first? What population arrived at the very beginning and set this entire chain in motion? We have no texts from them, no oral histories that reach back far enough, no monuments, no art, only the faintest ghost of a genetic signal buried in isolated Amazonian populations, slowly being decoded by machines that didn't exist 10 years ago. 15,000 years of fathers disappearing, mothers surviving. New bloodlines overwriting the old again and again and again. The DNA doesn't lie. It can't. And it's telling us that human history is far darker, far more violent, and far stranger than anyone was prepared to accept. So here's what I want to know from you. If this cycle repeated for 15,000 years, do you believe the Aztecs would have completed it? Or were they destined to be erased by the next wave, just like everyone before them? Drop your answer in the comments. Smash that like button and subscribe if you want to keep pulling these genetic threads. Because next we're looking at what ancient DNA revealed about the builders of the Egyptian pyramids and what geneticists found buried in those bones. Has some researchers questioning everything we thought we knew about who really built them. You don't want to miss that